That's what you said, Peter. Anyway.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you very much for having an historic memory. 21 years ago feels like forever. And if you just tidy the place up as well, Peter, that would be really great. Thank you very much for inviting me to Istanbul. It is one of my favorite cities in the world. And this is one of my favorite subjects. Changing the value of everything we do, transforming the value of everything we do for our companies, ourselves, and indeed for society more broadly. Now, what you might have noticed as well is that I'm afraid I have been the typical blasted consultant, and I have changed the name and changed the brief. And I've changed the title from Change Your Impact and Results to Change Your Value. Because we all need to demonstrate in everything we do the value that we're adding, the value that we're generating for our organizations. That's the impact. Those are the results that we need to show in terms of value if we're to have marketing, professionalism in marketing and branding taken seriously and taken at the right level in organizations so we can all have the kind of budgets that we want to innovate, to do great work and campaigns, and to have the kind of influence that we want as well. Now, I'm sure that I don't have to persuade you, but there are an awful lot of companies that still don't understand that the best, the most efficient, effective, and indeed only way of generating sustainable value in any organization is to build a brand. Now, that also applies to all of us personally, and I'll be talking about that a little later in the presentation. But for the moment, when it comes to value, I don't know if you recognize any of these numbers. And I'll tell you what they are. They are all financial amounts that brands have been either generating or losing or building over a very short period. So $7.2 billion was what Microsoft paid for the Nokia brand in 2013. And yet the Nokia brand is probably going to be dead by Christmas. And that's because Nokia didn't really exploit and use the fact that it was potentially a strong brand. It got too obsessed with its category. It got category bound in manufacturing handsets. And when you manufacture fashionable handsets without thinking about how to build a brand more broadly, you go out of fashion and you go out of business. This used to be one of the top 5 brands in the world. $29 billion was what the Toyota brand recovered to after it had its disasters with the accelerator problem. Do you remember? Everyone thought, what could be worse than having your brand associated with people dying? Allegedly. But Toyota's recovered because it's such a strong brand. It did manage to win people's trust back and generate the reliable value again. And $120 million was what Miley Cyrus earned in 2013. So going from the innocent Disney princess, in 2006, she was only worth $18 million. And coincidentally, she now has 18 million Twitter followers. So here's the key. Basically, you take all your clothes off, you poke your tongue out, and you twerk with unsuitable men. That's how you increase your value. And please, for goodness sake, if you are easily offended, do not look up, do not Google Miley Cyrus twerking and Turkey. It's not nice. Anyway, but she has been generating a lot of money. Her problem is how is she going to carry on generating sustainable value over the long term? Because at the moment, she's just a marketing phenomenon, not a sustainable brand. That's her problem. Now, this is a man who really does get sustainable value. I don't know whether you recognize this gentleman. This is a hard man. This is Warren Buffett, who's one of the world's most successful and least sentimental investors. And when he was asked recently by analysts what are the key ways in which he judges the future success of businesses and his investments, he said at number 3, it was a strong balance sheet. At number 2, it was a strong management team. At number 1, it was brand. And this is a man who chews concrete blocks for breakfast. He gets it. But sometimes you might have seen that people say, oh, you know, with the internet and the digital world and mobile and everything else, is this either the death or otherwise the fading of brands? Every few years, I'm asked to speak on television or at conferences about, is this the death of brands? Because what this article says, this study said, was in a perfect world of information, where product and price are laid bare and all the comparisons are there, when you can compare one against another, does this mean that brands are dead? Well, let me think about that for the moment. No. Of course it doesn't, because human beings aren't perfect in a perfect information world. We're messy. We have emotions. We like things. We choose to spend time with people that we like or we trust. And of course, in a world of exploding information, you want to know who you can trust. That's the key issue. So, no, brands are not dying. In fact, on the contrary, in a world where we're bombarded with information, human beings are not going to be able to stay awake for much longer, reading all the rubbish that people put on their websites and about their products. You need to navigate and choose that world of information, and you do that through brands. But these people did have a point, which was that the old world of the marketing funnel, you've got people to be aware of your brand. If they liked it, they might buy it, and then they might buy it again, and that generated sustainable value. Can it be that it was all so simple then? Now it's a mess. At any stage of the research process, or the trial process, or the purchase process, or any part of that cycle and relationship with consumers, you can be hijacked. Someone else can come in and say, don't use that, use this. But you do learn in the end who you can trust. And sometimes when I'm asked, could you please speak about branding in the digital age? I'm sure you've been asked that as well in your roles. And what people expect is for you to show sexy YouTube videos or, social media campaigns or vines or anything else like that. But what I tend to say, here's the killer insight, which is branding in the digital age means for you to be a fantastic business from inside out with people who care about what they do. And that's a really, really important role, in my view, for marketeers. And more on that in just a second. What branding is a really good idea for is generating long-term, reliable, sustainable value. And don't just take my word for it. You heard Warren Buffett. Here is The Economist, why brands are good for you. If you've got a strong brand, you've got a loyal customer. If you've got a loyal customer, that means more reliability of earnings, more reliability of income, and more reliability of employment. And that in itself is a very important social benefit. And we should remember just how many countries around the world now are competing in the brand arena. We should remind ourselves that China is still a communist country. And even the vice premier of China was talking about how brands and branded commodities are China's way forward to social and economic progress. They absolutely understand that he who owns the brand owns the wealth. That's the change and transformation that they want to see. They don't want to be the factory of the world anymore. And the challenge is, at the moment, made in China is a value-destroying thing to say. Made in Shanghai is slightly better. One of the challenges is We need to see a Turkish brand maybe in the top 100 most valuable brands in the world. China now has some very valuable brands in the top 100. What does Turkey need to do on an international stage to really develop strong global brands? What strong brands do also, strongly branded businesses, is outperform all others. If you can compare strongly branded businesses with the performance of all the other companies in the Morgan Stanley Capital Index and Standard & Poor's 500, this is how much those strong brands outperform all the others by over a 10-year period, up to about 70 points. And if you are talking to your finance directors, your accountants within companies, if you look at the income statement that every company needs to publish, what you can talk about is just how a brand works at the top line in generating sales, new customers, existing customers, making sure you're getting to those in a very effective and efficient way. And here's something that very few people really think about. They often think about branding and marketing as an expense, spending money, whereas actually a strong brand gives you a more efficient business. You get something like a 50% saving in employment costs, recruitment costs, if you have a strong brand. It's a great way of making sure a business works together efficiently. The brand is the most important and sustainable asset any organization has got. Sometimes people say to me, oh yes, the brand's okay, but people are the most important assets. Have you heard that one? I'm sure you have. And what I'll tend to say to that is, organize to do what? Because unless you're building a consistent idea together through a strong brand which you own, you're just a group of people doing stuff versus another group of people doing stuff. And the other thing about people and humans is they have a horrible habit of dying or leaving or taking customers with them. So people die, buildings fall down, products and services become obsolete. That's why the Nokia case is so interesting. But what lives on are the brand or the brands. And marketing is the key engine, as you know, for generating that. And of course, the strong brand impacts the bottom line because it makes profits more reliable. And that should be of interest to all of the financial people in an organization. So I think we need to think about branding 3.0, which is if in the old days, a company did its business, it had all its operations and HR and IT, and marketing hung off, or the brand hung off the marketing department, and then communications. The next stage for successful businesses has been to connect brand strategy and organizational strategy and add some value to every part of the experience and the process. It is the way you go to market in a way that is going to make you distinctive and different and able to generate reliable value. But here is branding 3.0, which is that it's all the same. Everything you do, every decision needs to be driven by the brand if you're going to generate long-term sustainable value. Now, this is, I think, a great opportunity and also a great challenge for many marketeers, which is it's so tempting to put your arms around a brand and protect it, think, this is ours, this is our power, this is our strength. But in order to create the most value, you need to open the brand to the whole organization. You need to act like the inspirers, the facilitators, the business managers. All of those roles are critically important, in my view, for the modern marketeer, because in a digital world, everything counts. And I say this also because this is also good risk management from a marketing role point of view. When I was working recently with a very large organization, the marketing department were charged with, were accountable for, the consumer goodwill ratings, to the customer satisfaction ratings. And do you know, a decision was made in the other part of the business to raise the price by 20%. Marketing had no control over that, and guess what happened to the customer ratings? They went like that. And guess who got fired? The marketing person. So it's in our interest to make sure that we get everybody in an organization to realize that to make a big change and make a big transformation in value, everybody needs to be accountable for the brand and feel responsible and passionate for delivering it. From the people who answer the phone, to the HR people, to the people who do IT, how are they all going to help you to build the brand in a distinctive way that inspires them and their customers? And here, don't just take my word for it. Again, Howard Schultz, who is the founder and the chief executive of Starbucks, so important is this, he says, I don't run a business, I run a brand. Again, one of the world's most valuable brands. And here is a tool to help think this through, which is think about what does the brand stand for? How should that show up in terms of how we develop distinctive products and services? How does that show up in terms of how we recruit, train, and develop and incentivize people? How does that show up in terms of our online experience? So it's way beyond being a brochure online. It's a living experience because that's how people will find out about your company and your brand. And yes, of course, it's about communication. You need to make sure everybody understands and contributes to this. I just want to use a few examples of where great brands have either gained extraordinary value, changed it up, or otherwise they've changed it down, or otherwise recovered it. There are three characteristics that all of these brands either share or have not been delivering. First and foremost is clarity. Clarity of what you stand for. Can you express what your brand stands for just in a few clear, simple words? How is it different from the competitors? And how does that show up through everything you do? Online, offline, from the way you answer the phone, as I say, to the way that you do business in the round. What are your people like? What do they say? How are your products always distinct? And also internally to externally, which is another way of saying there is no use pretending you are a smiley customer service organization on the outside if you're an axe-murdering culture on the inside. It doesn't work. And in a digital age, people will find out about any untruths with a scale and a speed that would take your breath away. This is the third characteristic, it's leadership. This is not just about who runs the organization and how they symbolize the best values of your brand. It's also about innovation, about restlessness, about setting the agenda. That's what correlates with long-term changes in value and impact. If we just think about Google, for example, Google, this was only 15 years ago, didn't exist. And how did Google do that? Well, they did it because they were totally, it's skipped. Skipped a beat, never mind. Well, extremely clear about what it is that they stood for. They're absolutely clear about being organizers of the world's information and doing that in a way that does no evil. And also they remembered, I'm sure you must find this very frustrating, that sometimes people can think that the brand is about the name and the logo and the advertising, but it's all the substance that lies beneath. You need to make sure you keep on getting that across to people, that marketing is about everything. So Google broke through with clarity about what it stood for and also its brand identity. But also Google looks after its people so well. It uses language that is unlike any other organization. Look at number 5 here. We love our employees. This is not corporate language. This is really human distinctive language. And they make the Google brand show up through everything they do, not just in terms of search, but in terms of Google X and the way that they give their engineers free time to come up with these extraordinary ideas too. And they're obviously voted one of the best companies to work for. They're a company of the future, not just of the past. But they have to make sure that they're not doing evil in a way that people are concerned about to be successful in the future. And here's a business, McDonald's, that 10 years ago people were saying, oh my goodness, are they finished? Are they on the decline because they were blamed for the obesity epidemic? They were also criticized for bullying environmental campaigners. But what's interesting about McDonald's and how they changed their value back up was that they really rethought the brand in the round. So to redefine the clarity of the McDonald's brand, not good fast food, because people think fast food is bad, but good food fast. Simple, easy enjoyment. And that shows up through healthier menus. It shows up through nicer places to be that are more for easy enjoyment rather than for zipping out just in a few minutes. And they're also looking after their people in a way that makes their people feel more proud and easier to deal with. Now, Toyota, what a terrible thing happened to Toyota back in 2009 with the accelerator pedal. Just after they'd become the world's most valuable car company, they admitted that they had lost sight of their customers. They'd lost sight of their brand priorities, their priorities of brand values. Where were the marketing people in making sure the customer's voice was really, really embedded in their internal conversations? And this is the drama of what happened to the change in value at Toyota through that period. But do you know, they've really got back on track. They've restated the clarity of what that brand stands for, of their vision. They're going to lead the way in the future of mobility, enriching lives around the world. And also, they shortened their lines of communication. They got their people out talking about the quality, the value, the reliability of Toyota. And they reinvented that brand from the inside out and have almost recovered to their position before the crash. Now, Apple you'll all be so familiar with, but why has Apple been so successful? Because it's been totally clear about what it stood for. And not within categories, not just saying we're just in handsets or we're just in computers. They've really defined the Apple brand by itself, not by categories. And they make it show up in products that look as though they were designed for human beings, that you don't just want to use, you want to lick. And people, making sure in their stores that you've got people who can explain things like a human being to somebody else, not like a machine. But they've also been extremely fortunate in the past in having a great leader who simplified what the Apple brand was about and made sure that all the priorities in that company were absolutely worth the Apple brand. Simplifying innovation. And do you know who this person on the right is? This is Steve Ballmer, who was the CEO of Microsoft. And I don't know whether you've seen him at a conference, but a bit like Peter, he would run onto the conference, punching the air, kicking ass, doing everything else. He was like a bomb going off. And that's a bit like the Microsoft brand versus the calm efficiency of the Apple brand. And do you know that Apple only invests 1/3 in terms of research and development versus Microsoft? That's because Apple is more efficient, because its brand is more effective and clearer and simpler. And I'm afraid that when Steve Jobs died, the Apple price went down. When Steve Ballmer resigned, the Apple price went up. This is a sad old world, isn't it? And as I said, Microsoft acquired Nokia, and very sadly. So other companies are getting together to try and beat the strong brand that is Apple. But Apple has to watch it so that its value change doesn't start going down, because has it started losing its cool? Does anybody think so? Their leader isn't quite so cool. And they've hired somebody who has got cool. So Angela Ahrendts, who was the chief executive of Burberry, has been brought in as global head of retail. I suspect she might be a new leader for Apple. But what Angela Ahrendts did at Burberry, a very old-fashioned brand, was to change the value of that brand by focusing on what it was best at. British style, which is well received in many countries in terms of tradition and style. And also, what Burberry managed to do was to be very modern in the way that it applied digital thinking and digital marketing. The tweet walk. You take photographs of the models, tweet it to all of your Burberry fans around the world, and with a trench coat you can get any variety of buttons, of collars. The people in the stores will do that for you digitally so that it really is beautifully integrated. And they even spend money on special music bands, unsigned, not famous music bands, to build the Burberry brand and image. There's no revenue generation. They're just building the asset that is the Burberry brand. And what's more, they want Burberry to be a really good company. So it believes that to be a great brand, it must also be a great company, looking after people, looking after communities, society, and the planet at large. And they are fantastically diverse as a business. And being diverse, if you're diverse, that generates more creativity, that generates more and better enterprise. This is not a nice to have, it's a hard business benefit. And they have really taken advantage of that. And it also recognizes something that Anita Roddick, do you remember Anita Roddick was the chief executive of The Body Shop, the founder of The Body Shop. And when she was speaking to us very recently, before she died, she said, we were searching for employees, but people turned up instead. People need to be motivated and inspired to do their very best. Stop calling people staff or employees. They're people that we need to engage and inspire. And that, in my view, is a really important, strong job for marketing. And to do that as effectively and efficiently as you can, as individuals, you need to think about branding yourself. Now, this book I can recommend. You'll see maybe on the subtext here that branding yourself is about how to look, sound, and behave your way to success. This is not just about your appearance, this is about everything you do. And if you want to run a business, if you want to be in the boardroom, getting the budgets that you need, getting the credibility that you need to make sure that you can read a balance sheet, that you can talk finance, that you can really, really understand the value of what it is that you're delivering. And that means making sure that you have this knowledge, that you can speak with authority about finances and economics. And if you can make that kind of difference, if you can make that kind of influence within organizations, we can also help to influence what's happening in the broader world, because brands have always been the most reliable generators of sustainable economic value. Now we need to make sure that they're also the generators of reliable environmental value as well. Because as a mayor of a very, very large city once said, if we don't get the environmental issues sorted out, there won't be any other issues left to worry about. So we all need to make sure we're recognizing what people want, inspiring them to be able to generate more value, as well as changing the nature and the debate about what value really is. And above all, I leave you with the question and the challenge, which is within your own organizations, and indeed for you yourselves as individuals, are you as clear about what it is that you stand for as you might be? What is it that you want? What do you stand for? What's your purpose? How can you express it clearly? How is that different and better than any other organization? Or how do you stack up against other people in your organizations? Secondly, how does that show up through everything you do? It's no use saying you want to be managing director if you can't read figures, if you can't express what you do in these financial terms. And what about leadership? How are you reinventing yourself, refreshing your knowledge? How are you innovating? How are you setting the agenda within your companies and also within your businesses and broader society? And at that, I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much for listening.